The Americans, to some extent, were lucky because some of the, let's say, profitable shale gas finds were in areas which were not very densely populated and had lots of water available, which is probably different to some of the areas where shale gas have been identified as a potential site for exploration in Europe, and you mentioned China as well, yeah.
Michel, I think you wanted to come in on the...
Yeah, to answer your question about the prospects of different energy mixes, I mean, the Commission DG Energy is currently preparing 2 roadmaps, 2050, on pathway to decarbonization, one for transport and one for electricity production, the 2 big greenhouse gas emitting sectors. And which form it will have, we'll see next year, but it is also to start a debate how decarbonization can look like. Although in the end, energy mix is the responsibility of member states. And to answer the question from the lady from IFRI, if we learn from the United States, I mean, there's currently really a large amount of conferences coming up with a lot of speakers from the United States. And we are already learning from them. We are free riding in a sense, although free riding is the wrong term if you see the prices of such conferences sometimes.
Get a speaker slot.
And I was lucky, for example, to attend a free session organized by IFRI actually, which also dealt with environmental aspects. So there was someone from the United States Geological Service and someone from the Polish Ministry of Environment. And unconventional gas is also a potential topic for the EU-US Energy Council. Mm-hmm. So we are active, we are approaching the colleagues in the United States to learn from them.
Okay, we had a question here. Gentleman again.
Are we not asking the wrong question as when we're saying, will conventional gas become conventional, unconventional gas become conventional? Shouldn't the question be, when will unconventional gas be conventional? Most fuels, most technologies that start off as unconventional eventually become the norm. And that's usually when the economics works out. And if we leave the gas in the ground, given the current supply scenarios and demand scenarios, you leave it there for 50 to 100 years, it's going to be worth a hell of a lot more at that time than it is today. I mean, that's a Gazprom strategy. It's a very clear strategy. Would it make sense, going back to the Commission now, would it make sense if you want to learn a lesson and rather than jumping in with both feet into such a thing, given the problems that have been discussed, that you pick a country that's got an energy security problem, and maybe it's Poland, maybe it's someone else who's living under the shadow of an unsecure gas supply, and do a small-scale demonstration so you can learn in your own backyard what the pros, what the cons, what the potentials are, and then make a long-term plan. So if we, continue on this path, this might be someday conventional. So it's when, not will.
Michel?
I mean, I can only recall what my Director General repeated several times. It's also for the market. And we actually have kind of demonstration projects. Several companies are drilling in Poland. They're drilling in Hungary. They started drilling in Lower Saxony, where I personally come from. So I don't think that we need to invest public money. And I have to think this because my Director General rightly said so, that we shouldn't invest public money into unconventional gas because we have companies who are also resource rich to do this, and they will do if they expect a profit. And the gas companies, they think in long-term horizons because that's their normal business, and therefore we will learning by doing, by the companies going on, by the application of the environmental directives by the member states. It's a constant learning process. We cannot simply say, okay, we make a demonstration now, and then we have learned, and then we can make a public strategy on how to go on. I don't think that would work in practice.
So I will organize a lot of study trips to Lubelszczyzna because we have 20 concessions in one region.
What do you think of this?
Learning by doing.
What do you think of this idea as Poland as a sort of guinea pig for,
this is the idea.
Gas?
This is the idea which came from. I think that if we will start, if we already are doing that, I think it will be good if other countries, companies, experts come and see our region feels so neglected that I think we'll be happy because one investment is bringing also other investments, and let's face that. And if people need work, it will be important, to have this type of investment flow.
Can I ask you one question directly to you? Based on what you said earlier, that gas is a direct low-carbon alternative to coal, would the Polish policy to exploit shale gas be part of replacing domestic coal?
I think that replacing it's impossible. If you have, as I mentioned, 90% of such an economy basing on coal,
Well,
then you can.
replacing parts of it.
But definitely we have to, because we are obliged by European norms. So this will be a big and important help.
And you think politically, it would be politically acceptable despite the...
Many coal mines are already closed. And many of them are closed. Many of them, less and less people are working in the coal mine industry. So I think it's very important. The question really in problem is the infrastructure, which we had been discussing, because either or we really don't have developed infrastructure, and the one which already exists, which we don't say very much about that, it's already very old in many new member states. So it's not only a question of building a new infrastructure grids, but also replacing the old ones. So I think that maybe thinking about the gas, we already have to think about different type of intelligent grids.
There's one really interesting point about the link between coal and gas, and that is because quite a substantial amount of the unconventional gas space is actually in coal-bed methane. One of the potential possibilities, which I think really could trump the coal issue, is the ability to actually drill for coal-bed methane. You replace the coal jobs with coal-bed methane jobs, and you diffuse significantly the political impact of switching off the coal-fired power stations and switching to gas-fired power stations. And I think that is really quite interesting. And I also think it fits in also with another issue, which is that one of the areas where I think Europe will develop, we're talking about Poland and shale at the moment, but one of the areas where I think we will see very significant development fairly quickly is in relation to coal-bed methane, which we haven't talked about very much. But you see, the land is already spoiled in most of the, in the Ruhr or in the Yorkshire coalfields. It's much easier to drill for coal-bed methane and get that through than elsewhere. And also you get the ability to switch much more easily where you've got domestic coal supplies, because politically you're replacing one set of jobs with another in the same area.
I would agree with you on coal-bed methane in principle. By the way, another bridge. The problem with coal-bed methane is its geological availability in Europe, because we have very old coal mines. And much of the stuff had been invented over the past, according to geologists. Coal-bed methane is much more, based on the geologists' survey and the IPCC assessment, is much more potential in let's say, more younger mining areas, such as in Southeast Asia, in parts of the US, and also in parts of Africa. But unfortunately, how you want to call it, less in Europe, based on current. There's still some left, but not that much as we may hope.
Well, we shall see. I have some other information, but we will see.
I'm happy to see that.
Well, we'll see. We can talk about
I'm happy to learn about this one.
We have about 5 minutes left for more questions and debate with the panelists. Do we have some more questions out there from the floor? Okay, and can I just pick up on the question of timing in general? It seems to me that in the energy debate, we're reliant on a lot of unproven technologies, be it, whose ability to deliver concrete results is unproven. CCS, unconventional gas, we've talked a lot about the uncertainty of the availability and of the reserves. Second generation biofuels as well. I mean, what kind of issues does that throw up for, given that the European Union has set itself very precise targets with firm deadlines?
I think one of the points about unconventional gas is that you need an infrastructure, you need the rigs, you need the secondary companies which will support the operations in some significant degree in order to actually have the scale to function and to also reduce the cost, and so it can actually be commercially produced. So with the amount of exploration going on in Poland, if it turns out there is a very substantial gas supply, they've already got quite a lot of people there. They are building up a structure, an industrial structure, which would allow you to then potentially produce that relatively quickly. But relatively quickly on an optimistic time frame, you're probably talking 5 years. I was talking with some people from the UK coal bed methane people recently, and they're talking about 10 years for it to be 20% of UK gas production. So that's the sort of 5 to 10 to have an impact. We should know relatively soon, though, whether or not there is significant impact. There is one other issue which is worth mentioning. There's a geopolitical impact on all of this, which is very interesting. And I mentioned earlier about the 12 trillion cubic meters Eurogas say they find in the Donetsk Basin in 5 concessions there, which is absolutely enormous. But the point about that is that this is kind of law of unintended consequences. The Ukrainians feel very under pressure because Nord Stream will start, the first stem of Nord Stream starts next year. And they fear there's a significant loss of transit fees. The Russians are talking about building South Stream. Now, in that context, actually developing your unconventional gas resources, if they're on that scale, is very attractive. It gives you a very significant lever. So we may find out of the blue, perhaps, a very significant development going on in Ukraine for political reasons, where it's really pushed very quickly. Now, we'll see if that happens. I don't know. The Ukrainian track record is, to put it politely, not good. But there are a whole series of geopolitical issues lining up which could make that happen. We'll see.
Does anyone want to address the timing issue or the lack of certainty about certain technologies?
Well, I think it all depends, and that's a difference, again, to the US debate, I think. Why would you use unconventional gas? What for? In the US, it was very much driven, and I think still is very much driven, to replace oil in the transport sector to go for liquefied natural gas in the transport sector. Whereas I think in Europe, the debate in the transport sector is very much towards electrification. I think that's a slightly difference. So in Europe, the move for, and it's very much security of supply driven, because everything works apart from gas from Russia, which I think is a kind of weird assumption anyway. So in Europe, the gas debate is very much a power debate, whereas in the US it's very much a transport debate. And I think this has not been solved yet in the infrastructure problem. What would it mean to develop an LNG infrastructure for transport in the US, and what it mean if we would focus on natural gas, or in this case unconventional gas, in the power sector. Last point here is, you said, and in principle I would agree, natural gas is a bridging low carbon fuel, but I think it's easy to say gas replaces coal automatically. It doesn't happen automatically. Because you have incumbent interests in coal, which don't necessarily move to gas because it's just nice and it's low carbon fuel.
But that's why I mentioned about the directives coming in force, which are triggering the closure of the most dirtiest plants, and that gives you an opportunity.
Yeah, but those most dirty plants are defined based on SO2 and NOx and not on carbon. Let's be honest.
Yes, but they're going to be closed, and that's an opportunity.
Right. You could argue with a strong cap-and-trade system by 2025 they would be closed anyway, in case we would have an effective cap-and-trade system. But anyway, this is a different debate.
Okay, Mrs. Kolarska-Bobinska, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I just want to comment. You said that how do we feel as a guinea pig? I think that there is a technology. We don't know details, American details, but already there is a technology, and as you said yourself, it's a changing technology. So we should think ahead how this technology will evolve. Also, here in Europe, we have a lot of rules, regulations, which are to some extent securing our land, nature, etc., etc. We have a lot of our country regulations, which are very strict, I would say, too strict. So I don't think that we feel so, completely subdued or, not bounded by anything. I think that there is a much bigger security that could be expected. And because we're coming to an end, I just can promise you that in front of the mirror, I will be practicing shale gas instead of shale.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Don't take it
I
personally.
know.
Don't take it personally, please.
Good. Well, that seems that's a good moment to end on a light note. And I would like to invite Agnes Cassens, the Chief Advisor of Gas Market Development at Shell, to make some concluding remarks. We don't have a chair for you, so maybe are you okay with a hand mic?
Simon, many thanks for the excellent discussion, and I think you did particularly well to include the audience and the panel members in that discussion. Thank you very much for that, and I'd like to thank in particular the panel members for the excellent discussion, because I think you covered a lot of different points. Not only that the word unconventional is really not one gas. We are talking about shale gas, tight gas, coal bed gas, so different parts of technology are also required. And also, I think I agree with you that on a European level, the prospects are big, and the potential, but we do not know whether we really can explore it to the extent that's there, because research is required. I agree with that. But also the technical and commercial challenges are absolutely there, and we need more investigation on what can be done. Now, let me also make some comments on gas in general, because you touched upon a couple of these comments, and in particular also in the direction of the decarbonized economy. And Simon, you mentioned three words which I would like to refer to. It is availability of gas, that is quite often questioned. Then it is the affordability of gas, and also the acceptability of gas in our energy mix. And when I'm thinking of the availability, current availability of gas is about 250 years of gas at current consumption. Quite a remarkable, and that does not take unconventional gas into account. Then if we talk about availability for Europe in terms of supply security, Europe is in the vicinity of 70% of the world's gas reserves, directly or indirectly connected via pipelines or via LNG terminals. So there is, with the diversity and with the increased infrastructure that I'm hearing that the EU is trying to achieve as well, and to develop that infrastructure, that supply security will even increase. Now, affordability, I think it was also mentioned that gas plants are 50% cheaper than coal, 20% cheaper than nuclear, 50% cheaper than wind. It is actually, on total cost, the cheapest energy source that we have. And it is also, when you look to the permitting process and the construction, the fastest energy resource that you can, which is quite important when we talk about 2020 achievements of 20 or 30% CO2 reduction. Because on all the other resources, you have much longer permitting processes and procedures. You have communities that don't like not in my backyard approach. So there are a couple of really good arguments to look into gas, probably not only as a transition fuel. Because acceptability, indeed, 50% gas plants emit 50% less CO2 than coal-fired plants. There is no sulfur problem, there is no NOx problem, there are no particular problems with gas, there is not a waste disposal of ashes, or other wastes. So that is an advantage, I think. And the gas efficiency of a gas plant is also about 55% compared to a coal plant, which is about 40%. Now, the other point is, Stefan, also the renewables support need, if the infrastructure of the grid isn't there. The intermittency of wind and solar has to be backed up by another energy resource, and the fastest that you can switch on is a gas-fired station, because a turbine, you know that from our planes, you can tune up quite fast. But I think the real issue is, when we talk about transition to 2020 or 2050, is we should all recognize that every CO2 molecule that we are emitting today has a long-lasting effect. It will not go away. It will be there. And it has accumulative over the time from today till we have reached a decarbonized economy. We are accumulating a lot of CO2. So for us, it is important, I think, to have the cheapest measure in order to reduce CO2 emission from today on very quickly. One of the fastest is, many people may not know, but a lot of spare capacity is in our gas plants because they are not using the full capacity. That is something to switch on tomorrow, basically. When we reduce, I think you said it as well, when we are retiring a coal plant, why not then building a gas-fired as a bridge? I know you tried to make the bridge a little bit as a joke, but I think it is a serious suggestion that we have to do if we want to achieve the 2020 targets. So, and then as a final step on the gas side, to retrofit a carbon capture storage facility, which is easier to retrofit as a gas station than into other power stations. So I think from all that, gas has and should have a long-term future in the energy mix in Europe. So I think that is really what we should try to achieve. Now I would like to come to an end and not hold you up further from drinks. Thank you for coming, and all the best, and we take some drinks together. Thank you very much, and thank you again.